83-year-old Christoffel van der Westhuizen, former commanding officer for the Eastern Province Command and former member of the Joint Management Committee, has testified today in the Cradock Four inquest in Gqeberha High Court, and he testified on his involvement or suspected involvement in the murders of Matthew Gqeberha, Fort Kalata, Sparrow Mkonto, and Mhlauli. In a moment, we will be speaking to the son of Fort Kalata, Lukanya Kalata, on today's proceedings. Thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you, ma'am.
So, walk us through your feelings on the testimony by Christoffel van der Westhuizen today. This morning, right at the beginning, he said that he can no longer independently recollect the details from 40 years ago. When you heard that, what were your feelings ahead of the proceedings today?
Look, pretty much expected. Throughout, I think, as we were busy, the NPA and us and dealing with them, we did get a sense and a hint that obviously his defense team would argue pretty much that he was old, he was, not of good health, and obviously that, his memory may not be as well as it once was. So that aspect of things, we expected it. We just didn't know the drama that would come with, some of what we saw in, playing out in court today. But it was expected.
So speaking of the response being expected, it is kind of consistent for what we've heard. Craig Williamson, Gerrit Erasmus, they either say they don't have recollection or they vehemently deny their involvement. Does this hinder the progress of this inquest? How does it affect a successful outcome?
No, look, I mean, that's a decision that the court would have to make. But I think our lawyers and I think the lawyers for the community of Cradock have been able to establish is that these aren't necessarily credible people. The evidence that they've given before this court isn't credible, and obviously the judge would have to make that finding. But from our side, I think our lawyers have done pretty well to to kind of point that out, that some of what these persons of interest have told the court isn't necessarily true, and that they are or at least continuing to withhold information and the truth from the court. But I mean, that's a decision that the court would have to make.
And then yesterday we spoke briefly about their testimonies and how it leads to other names. Can you talk about the significance of that?
Well, so remember what it is that we're trying to do here is that we're trying to correct historical fact, because unfortunately, due to the failures of the successive ANC-led administrations, we were unable to finally have our day in court where we were able to prosecute guys that were actually and directly involved in the physical act of killing them. So the only thing that we're left with now is really correcting a historic record so that General van der Westhuizen's children, so that his grandchildren, so that his great-grandchildren and generations thereafter would know just what a despicable man he was and the role that he played in the murders of not just my father, but also that of Matthew Gqeberha, Sparrow Mkonto, Mhlauli, and others. We now know, for instance, that Craig Williamson this week, he stood in this court where he spoke about his involvement in the murders of Ruth First, his involvement in the murders of Janet Squin and their daughter Katrein, who was 6 years old at the time. So, and that's correcting historical fact. And it's important for us so that we don't ever are confronted by people that deny apartheid or that try to equate apartheid to a false genocide that some white people in this country are claiming at the moment. So it's important that we do that. and which is, again, just to correct historical fact.
And then lastly, during today's proceedings, Van der Westhuizen spoke on the signal that was sent that said Matthew Gqeberha, Mbulelo Gqeberha and your father, Fort Galata, were to be removed permanently from society. And he said that these three were not seen as dangerous or terrorists, rather as activists. And this elicited quite a reaction from the gallery and from yourself. And can you share why?
Well, I mean, we know that he's lying. There were several signals, and this will come out in court tomorrow. There were at least two that served before the State Security Council. One was a military signal that came from the Eastern Province Joint Management Center from Van der Westhuizen that called for my father and Matthew Gqeberha to never be appointed teachers again. And then a few days later, on the 7th of June, there was a second signal. This one called for their permanent removal from society. We also know that there was a discussion that happened on the 19th of March 1984, where it was spoken about them being basically removed. A few days later, they were then detained, and they were held, in detention for 6 months. So we know that what we've heard thus far, coming from the general, isn't necessarily true. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Pleasure.
That was Lucanio Galata, son of one of the Cradock Four, Fort Galata, speaking on the proceedings today on day 4 of week 2 at the Gqeberha High Court. The inquest will resume tomorrow at 9:30. Thank you.